start with just a moment of silence. I know when I arrived at my work day today, I learned of some horrors in another workplace in the city of Cincinnati. And so if you would join me in just observing a moment of silence for the companies, the people, the communities that have been affected today. Thank you. We have a full agenda today and a number of guests. So we're going to do our best to have thorough discussions that follow the agenda. If you didn't get a copy, there are some extras up here. And as handouts are made available, if we need to make copies, we will do that as well. The agendas are on the table right there. It's kind of interesting having the whole committee right here. So used to looking across and seeing faces. So our first agenda item is going to be an update on the Welcome to Norwood process. And so it'll be short and sweet. At our last committee meeting, we decided to send a letter to the Norwood Chamber of Commerce. The letter was sent, and we heard a reply back from the executive director. They will consider our request to partner on the Welcome experience at their October 2nd board meeting. And so we will continue with that at that time. In the interim, I think we also were going to do some updates on the web consultation, and so we can prepare that update for our next meeting as well, for our next committee meeting. Is that all right? Yep. Okay. So that's our first committee goal, is to create the Welcome to Norwood experience. Our second committee goal has to do with small business in Norwood, and today we have two guests. I'm going to ask them to come on up and join us. If you take a seat where one of the mics are. The Hamilton County Development Corporation provides small business services, and we have with us tonight Catherine Fitzgerald and Bob Pickford, who are going to, did I get that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, who are going to share with us about a recent opportunity they've been awarded and how that interacts with some of our goals here in Norwood. So thank you for being here and for sharing.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. We'll make this rather quick. Again, my name is Catherine Fitzgerald. I'm a senior director in Hamilton County Development Company, HCDC, in the Economic Development Office. Just by way of background, we contract with Hamilton County. We are their Economic Development Office. We are located in Norwood on Mentor Avenue. We also have a small business incubator with over 70 tenants. And then thirdly, we do small business financing through the U.S. Small Business Administration. I did bring a handout with just some background information on HCDC, if anyone is not familiar with us. But what we're here for today is we have been fortunate in obtaining a grant through Duke Energy's foundation. They have an urban revitalization program. And we have actually worked with Duke for about the past 5 years. They have funded our time in communities in Hamilton County to provide small business assistance. It actually involves three things. Number one, ascertaining the impression of the business climate by the businesses. Secondly, business coaching, which is Bob Pickford's realm, and I'm going to let him speak about that. And then thirdly, being a resource to whatever business groups are in the community, whether that be a chamber of commerce. In this case, I know there's a quality of life initiative going on, the economic development piece of that. The stint is for a year. It's fully funded through, our time is fully funded through Duke Energy's foundation. And we have met with the administration. They've been very supportive of it. We are still fine-tuning things. We have entered into a memo of understanding with the city. No money is changing hands, but just a memo of understanding basically outlining this as our area of assistance. With that, I'd like to introduce our business coach, Bob Pickford, just to give you a little bit of a chance to understand what business coaching is.
Good evening. I will be working as a business coach one-on-one with small business owners in Norwood. And as Catherine said, my time is funded by the Duke Energy Grant. So that support is free to the business owner. It's also confidential. I work with all types of businesses, including startups and home-based businesses. They just have to be a business in Norwood proper. My background is for 25 years I was the chief executive of a wholesale food company based in Columbus. I moved to Cincinnati when I remarried and went to work as the chief executive of the nonprofit charged with revitalizing Findlay Market. And I did that for 11 years, leaving in 2013. Retired for 6 months, and then Catherine called and asked if I'd be willing to come back to work as a coach. I have worked with almost 400 small businesses in about a dozen communities since I came to work at HCDC. I try to help small business owners work on their businesses and not just in them, to encourage them to think strategically about their business and to work on some of the big picture issues. These are people who largely are managing by themselves, so I bring my experience and perspective as kind of a poor person's management team. It's entirely voluntary, so we're counting on other members of the community to spread the word. If you know people who own businesses, we hope you'll help us make them aware of this service. And hopefully by the end of the year, we'll be able to report that we've done some good for people in the community.
I'd just like to add that the focus is also startup businesses, so we are certainly available, even if a business is considering opening. The big thing would be that the city limit, Norwood proper, because that's where the concentration is. But even for a business, a thought that someone might have. Secondly, I just want to mention, if you're familiar with SCORE or SBDC's Small Business Development Centers, this is very similar, but I would say more customized. We come out to the business. I proactively call on the business. We will do a final report summarizing impressions of the business climate. We're very transparent, so we don't want to make anyone look bad in terms of if there is a concern that perhaps needs to be brought to the attention of the administration or whatnot, we would go ahead and make that call, and take care of that. So we do work closely with the city and, again, very transparently, really with the goal of helping small businesses thrive.
Go ahead.
If it's agreeable with you, I'd like to leave a couple of flyers for the public and for you if you're interested that explain a little bit about what we're doing.
That would be wonderful. If you would, you can leave the copies here on this table for members of the public here, but we can also post those around. I'd like to find out, are there any questions from the committee?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for being here today. Appreciate this. Ms. Fitzgerald, you mentioned a memo of understanding with the city. Mm-hmm. I'd like you to go a little more into that. Can you just a little bit more into that, exactly what that means and what your understanding would be?
Absolutely. It basically states, and I can certainly share a copy of it, it basically states that the city is on the hook for no dollars will be transferred. In fact, we've already been paid by Duke Foundation directly. But basically outlining this scope of services because we still feel obliged to provide a service. Quite honestly, this is the first time Duke has granted the money directly to us. Normally, they grant the money to the community entity. It has to be a 501c3. And then we contract with that entity. It makes it a little more cumbersome, but it's simply stating that we are going to provide small business assistance for a 12-month period with periodic reports and a final report. So again, the city's not on the hook for any dollars transferred. We've probably now worked in over 10 communities. It's gone very well. We're very flexible. We try to even garner the resources we have with HCDC. We have things like morning mentoring. which is kind of a business coaching on steroids, if you will, a little bit.
Okay.
If we think that that's beneficial to a business, we will invite them to do that. So we really try to leverage the resources that we have through the incubator as well.
12 months, that don't sound like very long. Have you started? Have you worked with any businesses yet, or is this just getting started?
September 1st.
Okay.
And we've been at meetings in August as well, but
Okay.
the hard start is September 1st. So, and I will say that we don't necessarily have a hard stop, but Bob does try to hand them off in good hands, either to SCORE or SBDC or something like that. We don't just say, the clock has stopped, you're on your own now, so,
Great, thank you.
sure.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So if there's a business at home that wants to get, or somebody at home that wants to contact you about this, either they want to start a business or they have one, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Our contact information will be on the flyers that I'm leaving, and I encourage everyone to make copies and spread them around town. Catherine will be out working directly also, but we really depend on local stakeholders to introduce us, because a typical first reaction is guarded, and people often think we're trying to sell them something. So if we can be introduced to the community by people that business owners already know, that's a big advantage.
Great.
And I will say, we will request to be on the agenda for the Norwood Chamber and do a similar presentation. Again, just to get their stamp of approval and go through official channels. And then we do ask that you get the word out as much as possible, because small businesses are so accustomed to being solicited for, they can't believe that it's free, in other words. So
Yeah.
anyone who can spread the word. When we meet with businesses, we also ask for referrals who might be a good candidate. So the sooner we can get the word out, the better.
Cool.
I have a couple other questions. When you talk about the final report and the reports along the way, what are you reporting on? Is that how many businesses, what the climate is?
Yes and yes. How many businesses we've spoken to date, a summary of the business climate questions. We generally will also share the survey that we're hoping to use. Should the city want questions added, we're happy to add those. But we do try to respect the confidentiality of the businesses, so we report on those things from a summary basis. And anything Bob reports in terms of business coaching, he gets permission to report those things. So generally we report, quarterly, we do short reports, and then we'll do a final report, probably month 13, where we're summarizing the business climate. Bob will report on the number of clients he's coached and a little bit of a summary of the things he's worked on, and then any kind of resource, any resource materials or information that we've provided either to the chamber or other business groups in Norwood.
Do you have something to add? That sounds great. Thank you for sharing that. And then I think my last question would just have to do with, do you offer any type of comparative when you do that final report? I know you've worked in and are working in multiple municipalities and neighborhoods. With the way the program operates, is there a comparative element, or is it just a report of that area?
I would say we don't really do a comparison. For instance, we wouldn't say that 90% of the businesses in Norwood, sales have gone up in the past year, but they've gone, it's probably not a great, probably wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. So in the past, we just have not done that. I guess it's something to think about, though.
Thank you. I think that helps just create expectations for what the city could learn from the report of services. I appreciate you both being here. I know you're going to leave flyers today. If you have a copy, you can share with the members of the committee. We can help get that out as well. Are there any other questions? Okay. Any questions from the public here?
Hi, Catherine and Bob. Pastor Son James here. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being in Norwood. A couple of questions, though. the focus of what you do, one thing I love hearing the word transparency, and thank you very much for including that in your presentation. For me personally, and I know a lot of folks that think like I think, transparency is very important, especially in a community like Norwood. Okay? So, is there a maximum capacity of clients you are able to work with at one time?
So for the benefit of the public, because the meeting is recorded, I'm just going to repeat the question. The question is there a maximum capacity for the number of businesses you can work with at one time?
There probably is, but we've never exceeded it in any of the communities that we've worked in. So if we were to bump up against my ability to keep up with the demand for support in Norwood, that would be a new thing, and we'd be happy about that, and we'd figure something out.
I'd just like to add that the business coaching piece is, I always say it's kind of like having a personal trainer. The client or the business has to get up on the treadmill. They have homework. Bob doesn't do the homework for them. So quite candidly, there is a tendency to push a meeting back on occasion because the homework hasn't been completed. But Bob avails himself greatly, gives his cell phone and accepts texts and whatnot, so we really encourage engagement.
Thank you. Is there a follow-up?
Yes. And with that question, how you said August you started attending meetings. I assume you're talking specifically here in Norwood. So with that, I mean, you started September 1st. Is that correct? So then, how many businesses so far do you have on the agenda from Norwood just from August to September 1st? How many businesses, small businesses, have you already put on your agenda list prior to September 1?
I have not met with any Norwood businesses yet.
Just to clarify, in August, I personally met with Mr. Pickford and Ms. Fitzgerald, and it was really just so they would notify us they were putting a proposal in. And so there was this meeting here. I was very intentional when I found out the award was given to them, to Norwood, to make sure the administration was aware that they had presented this proposal. Duke awarded it. The administration was there to be able to be recognized. And so I asked them to come to this committee meeting since we focus on economic development as a way to make the public aware they're beginning these services. There was one more question, then we're going to switch topics.
So, in Norwood, and with any small business, there are always legal parameters, and I'm wondering to the degree to which you offer kind of legal expertise that might draw the line. Also, Norwood has its own legal guidelines for, anything from signage to annexation to our tenant. So I just wondered if you thought through that, because the learning curve can be, well, it can last a lifetime, I believe.
The question was
Yeah.
whether we provide legal assistance to businesses, and are we aware and capable of working with the Norwood ordinances specifically. So I am not an attorney, and I tell people that when I work with them. However, I can refer people to attorneys. Many of the legally oriented issues that I work with business owners on are around incorporation, that type of thing, and I do provide resource materials about that. But if a business owner needs real legal assistance, they need a real lawyer.
Thank you all for engaging in this topic. I will definitely invite you to come back and share updates with us, maybe to fall behind when you do the quarterly reports, just so the public can stay aware of what's going on. At this time, we're going to transition into our second topic under small business in Norwood. So I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the question is, for people who are listening to the meeting who aren't in the room, could you share out over the microphone your contact information so they would know how to contact you?
Absolutely. Our office number is 513-631-8292. You can also reach out to the city, to Joe Gears. He knows how to get a hold of us as well.
So that number was 513-631-8292.
Correct.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. So our next small business in Norwood topic is the CRA agreement for William DeLuca Commercial Property Location 3770 Montgomery Road. Mr. DeLuca, would you come join us? Mr. Moore, could you come join us as well? So at a recent regular committee meeting, I think it was a regular committee meeting versus committee of the whole. Yeah, it was a regular committee meeting. We received a memo from Jerry Stoker, our building commissioner, to Mayor Williams regarding this very topic. And the memo advised us that at the present time, the date on the memo is August 13, our building commissioner was not, according to our existing ordinance, able to process this project for a tax exemption is what was stated. And so the request was, well, the decision at the time was to refer this topic to this committee, which the ordinance requires the committee looking at economic development opportunities to review. Did I get that right? I mean,
Close enough.
Okay, I think we're all on the same page. That's my goal. So, this is our first meeting with this topic. I definitely have some questions, and so I'm glad you could be with us, Mr. Luca. Mr. Moore, I'm glad you're here because I also have some questions I think you could answer as well. And so, I'd like to start with some of the questions and then have you maybe fill in some gaps.
Sure.
So, my first question has to do with the actual ordinance itself. It is entitled in a way where we need to have in place for our community reinvestment areas of the city to be administered in a program. We need to have a housing officer. We need to create a community reinvestment housing council. We need to have a tax incentive review council. And then where designated in the ordinance, this committee reviews the commercial request. It's my understanding, Mr. Moore, that we do not have a tax incentive review council in place. Can you speak to whether or not having one in place allows this program to move forward?
My understanding is that we have a tax review committee, and I believe that they handle that.
So
We have a number of existing CRA agreements that are in force and businesses that are receiving the abatements.
So at this time, when I worked through our clerk of council's office, I could not get any clarity on that. The statement that I got back was there isn't one, that it needs to be reset. There were a couple of names mentioned in a regular meeting as to who those are who are appointed. We're supposed to have 2 representatives to the city of Norwood appointed by the mayor with council concurrence who do in fact do what you said, make sure the abatements are in compliance. And so to date, I have not been able to understand, I have not been notified, I've not been told we actually have this council in place, which prohibits this committee from finding out, do you have a current abatement? And is it in compliance? That's one of the questions I have, and I don't have a resource to ask that of.
Okay, have you contacted the building department?
The request was sent out to get the information, and what I got back was we don't have one, that it needs to be reset.
We don't have which?
We do not have a tax
review- you mean-
incentive review council.
We don't have a tax review, because my understanding is we have people that have been appointed to it.
That's what I thought as well, and so
So-
I'm at a loss for where to go now.
Okay.
I don't know who they are because I'm being told they don't exist. Like they haven't been convened.
Well, that would be a problem and should be addressed.
Could you recommend a next step?
Well, if Jerry Stoker doesn't know, then I would suggest we need to contact the mayor and tell him we need to appoint some people to this committee.
Okay,
Madam Chair,
give me just a moment. I want to take note of that as where we might need to go next, and then we'll get right back with you. Mr. DeLuca.
thank you. If I may, I'd like to go through the chair to ask the law director. In the previous CRAs that have been given, was there this board? And if not, are those illegal? Do they need to be rescinded?
They're quite possible. To be honest with you, I don't know, because I don't know if the board existed. I don't know, because the CRA program was established, was it 2008?
9.
2009?
2009.
And there were, there have been a number of them. I don't think we've done a new one, James. I don't think we've done one in the
Forest Avenue.
last few years.
Yeah, not since I've been on council, we have not.
I don't think we've
Our
done
council
one,
has not.
so.
Yeah, we've not done one. I think Reliant Hospital or Health South was the last.
Forest Avenue is my understanding, probably one of the most recent ones.
What on Forest Avenue?
Or Norwood Avenue, excuse me. Norwood Avenue. There's,
The living room thing?
yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that was that was before that or definitely Eric or Leslie was elected. So,
Right, that was
yeah.
quite a while ago.
We haven't had one that's come through yet. So
Thank you for pointing that out. This is the first time this ordinance was raised for this committee to address, which is why there may be a lot of outages in terms of understanding what has happened with your application, but I'm not aware that we're even in compliance with the way it's been set up. So while we could potentially do some fact-finding in terms of how this application got to be considered the way it is, I think we're not, I don't think we're in compliance to try and consider this just yet.
well, I'll just
Go ahead.
thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just say that there is some kind of a review committee that is in place that I know John Hanrahan was appointed to. Did you get a chance to look into that to find out what that committee was?
That is the Tax Incentive Review Council.
Is that what you're referring to then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that is section, I believe it's 11 of the ordinance. And I was not, yes, section 11. And that's established pursuant to Ohio Revised Code. It's my understanding that because this is also staffed by, county commissioners, we have a couple of representatives from the city, and then there's also the county auditor. This is an entity that is a hybrid.
Yes. I would say before we rush to that we're maybe not in compliance, I mean, this committee meets, I don't know how often they meet, but basically every municipality in Hamilton County has a similar type committee, and so they have, and a lot of them, they share members of the committee. So
This is true. This
so-
group meets annually.
Yes, okay. And so, they run through, so maybe the Norwood portion meets a half hour, 45 minutes, and then they'll do the Blue Ash portion and whatever portion. So if there's other areas that you think that we're not in compliance in, I mean, that's fine. I just don't want to rush to start making assumptions or,
Well, I'm not making an assumption. What I'm saying is, as this is referred to our committee, no one who is a resource to our committee from the administrative side has been able to provide the contact information for this Tax Incentive Review Council. That's all I'm saying. And so, because I would have questions of them and our current status of abatements, this is not the first property Mr. DeLuca has owned and renovated, is my understanding, but I don't have the annual report to be able to glean the history of his work, etc. We don't have it. So
Sure.
that's where I want to start with making sure we have the right resources to consider the request.
okay. Do you mind if I ask a question, Mr. Moore?
Please.
Thank you. And Mr. Moore, thank you for being here. Can you explain, what, from your time on council and, what your understanding as law director, I mean, let's just say that you know, there's a business, let's just ignore the business that's currently in front of us. Let's just say there's a different business that hasn't even applied for permits yet, and they've decided they want to get a CRA. I mean, what was council's role back in, when you were on council, to facilitate that and make that work? Like, I guess, does the law department just draft up an ordinance? Is there...
It's happened in a couple of different ways. It's been, sometimes it's, and the law department has worked on a couple that have not panned out. I think the senior housing one was one, and went back and forth with terms with the developer on, you know, what kind of terms would work and what wouldn't, fill in the blanks on how big the project is, how many jobs, that kind of thing. Sometimes a developer will come in and meet, the Economic Development Committee used to meet regularly, and so it would be, we'd have businesses, things that were going on, they would be in contact with the building department, with the mayor's office, and so they would come to our committee and we'd work out the details. And sometimes it's worked out behind the scenes, and then the agreement and or at least the application is forwarded to the committee to take a look at and say, well, I don't know if we want to go with this one, maybe if they agree to this as well, or it's not big enough, or we don't feel comfortable with this much, maybe not quite that long. So we have those kinds of conversations, or at least get some background in the committee as far as what the project is. And then, and it's a provision that's got to come through this committee before it goes to council. What goes to council is an ordinance that authorizes safety service director to sign the agreement, kind of the standard ordinance with a bunch of whereases about how cool the project is.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like if there were a business that was ready to go like that, that would be we would just need to get the ordinances together, come to this committee and talk about that. So what would happen if a council, and let's just say the Council of Blue Ash, like that there was a project that they got their permits, they broke ground, there's already framing up, what have you, and the Blue Ash Council decided at that point, well, we're going to go ahead and pass the CRA after the construction started. Like, what are the repercussions for the Blue Ash City Council if they were to do that?
I don't know if the council has any repercussions for
Well, I mean, because
council.
they're
I mean, at some point, I mean, these are sent to.
Well, there's a reason why the question there's a reason why the question was asked, is because this is a state process. The CRA thing, and I didn't want to, I'm not using Norwood because
governed by state law. The
Yep.
state allows cities to set up these programs.
Yeah, and it specifically states in the law that you cannot, and it's a state law, you cannot process this once construction is started. So the reason why I use Blue Ash as an example, because they are in the state of Ohio, so I'm just trying to understand, like, you're understanding what's the repercussions. Let's just say City of Norwood. What would be the repercussions to the city if we passed it for something that's clearly started? Right now, I don't see one that's clearly started, but
I don't see that there's a repercussion for the city of Norwood. At some point when it goes to the tax review board, when it goes to the county, because these are sent to the county, and at least theoretically subject to review by them on a regular basis, then it says, well, this construction already started, and so you're not eligible for this, and can deny it.
so there's another a process after. The
Assuming they
municipality.
look at it, which I'm not going to guarantee they do, but that would be the potential. That would be a possibility.
Okay.
So as a point of clarity, are you saying it is the county review board that is responsible for noticing whether or not there's compliance with that part of the revised code?
There are county and maybe state, because you have to submit the paperwork to somebody, and they have to change it on their records. So it's the county that charges the taxes. So they either charge the full amount, or they deduct the abatement. I know that they're submitted to a body, and the body takes a look at it, and I'm not sure exactly how detailed they are or how serious they are about it. It may be that, because when a major project is done, the permits, we're pulling this much of a permit, it's going to be that big a deal. Those are communicated to the county so that those amounts can be added to the property tax. The amount of the increase in the property. At that point, they may say, "Oh, we got this before the CRA was passed." I have no idea what they do with it when they get it, but that would be it. Somebody would find out and say, "Oh, you're not eligible for this." The same way if you passed a TIF and they said, "Oh, you didn't do this right." At some point, they could say, "Well, no, you don't get to do that."
Thank you, that's really helpful. So took note of your suggestion, Mr. Moore, to check in with the mayor and Mr. Stoker to confirm, do we have a review council? That noted, and an action to follow this meeting, based on the current ordinance and communication the committee's received, does anyone else have any questions about this CRA agreement request?
I'm kind of
Mr. Brady?
curious. Did you deal with this with your last development there on on the corner, on your
With Bettis?
Yes, sir.
No. Bettis was constructed in 2001. This was past 2009.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just struggling to figure out where we are. You've been denied.
What? Apparently. So, a little history, maybe help everyone. Get drawings. Lots and lots of money right here. Meet with the building commissioner. This is what I'm doing. Time I've submitted for the drawings. He said, Will, in 2009, City Council passed an ordinance that created a CRA designation for Norwood. Here's the ordinance. Read through it. If you want to pursue it, call me and let me know. I said, okay. Gives me the ordinance. I read through it and I said, this is a no-brainer. Absolutely, I want to take advantage of it because I'm doing exactly what this ordinance is set up to do. Called him one time. No phone. He did not return my phone call. Called him 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 separate phone calls. He did not return my phone call. Meanwhile, the permit process took about 2.5 months because of the revision. Carey Town called me up, the secretary to the building department, one day and said, Mr. DeLuca, I have your permit, it's ready. At that point, she said, I said to her, hey, I've been trying to get a hold of Jerry Stoker about the CRA. She goes, let me put you through to his voicemail again. I left a message. I came up here, picked up my permit, and I saw Mark Reeves. I said, Mark, I have to pour a footer within the next 2 days to support the foundation. If I don't, I'm going to lose that trade because they have other schedules. The process has taken so long that these trades couldn't wait any longer. They had schedules, other places. I had a trade tell me, well, if I don't get this project done, I'm fined $1,000 a week. So they had to move on. So I asked Mark if he could come up and inspect it so they could pour the footer. Mark came up very, very quickly. He inspected it, said, go ahead. I said, Mark, what's going on with Jerry? He has not returned my phone call. I'll see him tomorrow. I'll have him give you a call. The following day, Jerry calls me. And I asked him, I said, Jerry, I've been trying to get a hold of you about the CRA. Oh, you don't qualify for it. You poured your footer. And that's what happened. And that's, and so at the last council meeting, there was the letter that you spoke of that was slid under the door, given to Miss Lake, not even giving me an opportunity to respond or whatever. Fortunately, I was watching the council meeting, saw it, and I ran up here. And so the matter was graciously put into your committee. To me, I'm not trying to get over on anyone. I'm not asking for any favors. I'm simply trying to get what any person should be able to get in this town. And it just, when you look at the ordinance, you read the ordinance, in the spirit of the ordinance, this is exactly what I'm doing. This is why we have the ordinance in place. And to use a technicality, because I should have pursued it without him. Look, I'm a business person, and if I need something done, I go to the source, and I expect for that person or that company to do it. If they don't, then I move on to the next person. If someone tells me, Will, if you want to do something, call me. And if I call you, it's a shame. It's a shame that we're wasting everyone's time, my time, these folks who are doing good work, quality of life work. But I'm telling you, I understand your concern with that provision, which leads to a lot of questions that I have in regards to all the other CRAs that have been given. But this is the Economic and Community Engagement Committee. And I look at all these people here tonight who want to make Norwood a better place. I think you guys are getting a clear picture of what the problem is here. And when you drive up and down Montgomery Road and you see empty storefront after empty storefront after empty storefront, ask yourself, why is that? I'll tell you why. Because our process is too cumbersome. We make it extremely difficult for small business owners, for people who have spent a lifetime saving up their hard-earned money, to say, you know what, I have a dream of opening my own business. And then they come here and it's smashed. And they say, you know what, I'll just go elsewhere. And that's what's happening. But I know we can't address much tonight because of your concern, but I hope that you folks really take a hard look at the problem that really lies within this building.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Luca, for your comments. Go ahead, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you. I absolutely see where you're coming from. My problem with this whole situation is what appears to be the breakdown from the city side of providing adequate services to the people and business owners in our community, regardless of whether it's Mr. DeLuca's business or anything. When we have an administrative group within our city whose job it is to work in liaison with the businesses within our community to make sure that they're able to take advantage of whatever it is that we may be doing. That process, I don't know that it broke down here. It just didn't happen. You didn't get your calls returned. If I'm another business looking to come to Norwood, and I'm tuning into this meeting to see if maybe I would want to do that, and I see that we have an administration or part of our administration that does not adequately or willingly deal well and respectfully with our business owners, I agree with Mr. DeLuca and say that I might take my business elsewhere. I think this is a problem totally separate from, what's happening with Mr. DeLuca is a problem, but it's also a major problem for our city in that we have a department that isn't doing what they need to be doing. I just wanted to say that, and kind of separate from what we're talking here. Just it bothers me that this is a face that our city puts forward. This is the way that outside organizations can potentially see Norwood. And I think it's a problem that, I don't know if this is something that this group can work with, but it's a problem that the city needs to deal with. Thank you.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. So, one concern that I have is that we are getting, I talked to Jerry Stoker today. So him and I had a pretty long phone conversation and asked him about some of these items. Well, he said that you and him met late last year, and he gave you the ordinance.
2 years ago.
Well, you did say that you all met a couple years ago when you were first considering it. But he said that you also came in and met again, and he gave you the ordinance, a copy of the application, and I think I forgot the last thing he said he gave you. But, is that true? Did he give you an application for...
This is coming from the guy who didn't return 5 phone calls, who's now trying to cover his tracks.
It's not about covering the tracks. It's more about trying to understand, what...
Mr.
Yes,
Bonsall?
he admitted to me he didn't call you back. I will say that. That's...
If it would please you, Mr. Bonsall, I'd be happy to produce my phone records.
No, I don't... Well, I will tell you, just said that he already said that he did not call you back, or it was delayed, at least is what he said. But the thing is, I guess my concern is that I don't want to be rushing to judgment if we haven't heard from the building department as well. And by the way, if we can do anything to get this thing processed, let's get it done. But, I talked to the gentleman at Shimrick and Lay's that opened the distillery there, and they had nothing but great things to say about the building department. And so, I guess my concern is that I just want to make sure that we're not demonizing a group without understanding, how it works in other cities and whether we're there's certain public safety type things that have to happen. So when you open a business and, they have to review plans, they have to make sure that those are there.
It's funny you brought up Shumwick and Lee's.
Excuse me one second, Mr.
Sure.
DeLuca. I just want to make it clear, the intent of this discussion is not to frame anything as demonized. It is to get clear on what does the ordinance compel us as a committee to consider. And my first question was about, are we in compliance for the program as established by the ordinance? I do want us to continue the conversation, and I'll continue to take note of next steps we need to take to really consider the request of the CRA. But I do want to make it clear that there was an invitation for Mr. Stoker to come to this meeting, and he declined it. I'm glad you had a chance to talk with him, Mr. Bonsall, but as it is today, we as a committee are not resourced to understand, in my opinion, if we are accountable for granting an exemption, if the county is accountable, or if when the city notified us the way it did, it was making its choice right then. Mr. DeLuca.
Thank you. I was just going to respond to Mr. Bonsal's comment.
Madam Chair, if I could, I have to leave in about 10 minutes, and I was hoping, and I understand, but I just want to mention this. I have been on the receiving ends of complaints that I have called my council member, and they never got back to me. Who's your council member? Keith Moore. I'm your council member. I work at home. You never called me. And I'm not saying, whenever you hear this, and there's one person in the room and not the other, there are two sides to every story. We are never going to get to the bottom of this. I understand Mr. DeLuca's frustration, but I'm not sure that I certainly don't have the time over the next 10 minutes, if that's what we're going to end up talking about. If there's anything else you have for me, I would like to go. And really, I'm happy to pass on the conversations about phone calls that were not returned and people talking snotty to each other and all the rest of it. I understand Mr. DeLuca's frustration. If the committee wants us to do a draft agreement, I'm more than happy to do that. It's pretty much fill in the blanks. I think Mr. DeLuca has a copy of a draft agreement to take a look at. And I don't know if he's got any objections to it, but that's where we are. And I can follow up with Mr. Stoker on the various committees that are supposed to be in place under the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. I know you are time bound. I've not seen a draft copy of the agreement, and the ordinance says that we should see that to review that. So if you could provide that, that would be great. If you can follow up with Mr. Stoker, that would also be great, so that we can be clear, are we actually in compliance for the program?
Here's it's kind of standard form. So there's one that cancels.
Is this estimate the same?
It's essential. They're all essentially the same. There are different provisions you can put in, but that's that's Ray Hamilton. So that was pretty early, and so
So the new place on Section, they received a CRA?
they received a CRA the ordinance was passed, well, I guess 2014, so. But that's pretty much what the terms are. It's basically they are going to do this. They're going to build this project. It has to be at least $75,000 for a commercial. It talks about you're going to meet these space requirements. You're going to have, if we want to condition, if the city wants to condition it on this many employees or this amount of payroll or this amount of, work you're putting into it or landscape and whatever terms you want to put in. But for the most part, it's kind of fill in the blank. It's this big. It's this many square feet, this many stories, this much investment, this many employees. It's primarily from the developer. That's what they need to do is fill in those blanks. Actually, the ones that have gone by the wayside the last several years have been because they wanted 100% abatement, which requires school board agreement, and schools are not interested. So,
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Moore. Does anyone else have a question for Mr. Moore before he heads out? Thank you for being with us. I'll be sure to follow up with you.
okay, thanks.
Mr. Luca,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate your recollection of what has happened. I think as a committee, we definitely have heard your concern with the core issue around the process. And I think that we'll continue to discuss what we can do to try and prevent that from happening for future businesses that might want to make their home in Norwood.
I think that's a great idea, and I'd still like to respond to Mr. Bonzel's comment.
Please do.
First off, this process began March 2nd. We're now September 6th,
When did you submit your application? Mr.
March
Doyle?
2nd.
That's not what I was told it was submitted a month and a half ago. Like,
Would you like to
your
see-
application for the CRA? Are you, no, I mean, I'm serious.
What? That's when he returned my phone call. I mean, what do you want me to do?
Okay, so I mean, the city got your application on, you're saying March 2nd?
No. I filed for permits on March the 2nd. At that time is when Jerry Stoker gave me the ordinance, just the ordinance, and said, Will, in 2009, Norwood City Council passed an ordinance creating a CRA. Read through this. If you want to pursue it, give me a call, and I'll get the ball rolling. Well, I called him, and I called him, and I called him, and I called him, and then I called him again. And he never returned my phone call. He admitted to you he didn't return my phone call. You know, you brought up Shumrick and Lee's, and those guys are doing good work down there. But just to give you an example how things operate in this city hall, those guys are operating. They don't have an HVAC system, barely. Go in there in the middle of summer, it's 110 degrees. No mechanic. I mean, how'd that happen? I had to spend $2,300 in mechanical drawings to prove that I got to have enough heating and enough ventilating and enough air conditioning. See, when you like something, you push it right on through. And when you don't like somebody, guess what happens?
So, well, we can find out if Shumrick and Lace had to go through.
No,
that process
you
as
leave
well.
those good guys alone.
Oh no, I'm not.
No, you leave them alone. You brought them up. I'm just responding.
They're already there, and they've already got their permits. Nobody's going to
Yeah.
mess with Shumrick and Lace. But I will find out though if they had to submit them the stuff. I mean, nobody's going to mess with them. They've got their certificate of occupancy. They're ready to go. They're good. They didn't ask for a CRA. I don't think they put I don't know if they put $75,000 into that, but. The question was just there because I want to make sure that we are considering everybody, equally. And I know that you, are passionate about this, and I know that you're passionate about, the building department. And
Mr. Bonzel, just so you're aware, if I get the CRA designation, great. If I don't, even better. Because I'm going to expose how things are so screwed up in this city hall. And I'm going to expose that you have an opportunity. As chairman of the finance committee, you have no idea how much power you hold in the palm of your hand. I have two committee chair people right here. You have a lot of power to fix this.
Mr. DeLuca, thank you for your comments. In the interest of our full agenda and our other guests, I'm going to ask that we switch topics at this time.
You folks have a nice evening.
Thank you very much. So next on our agenda this evening is neighborhood associations in Norwood.
Does the community get a chance to respond, or that's an agenda item? And we're here as residents to not only hear, but also to participate.
Mr. James, do you have a question for Mr. DeLuca?
Well, I don't think it's just Mr. DeLuca. By the way, thank you for coming. I think if we're going to be transparent here, the issues that have been brought up are very valid, and if the committee is going to take time, which, by the way, thank you for this committee taking such a stance to even address these issues. But the real issue here is transparency. And from a resident's point of view, not to personally attack any of your committee members, but from a resident's point of view, when you have a hard-working individual saying, I'm doing everything the best that I can, and then you have individuals on the committee who even challenge the verbiage. From a resident's point of view, if someone doesn't call you 5 after 5 times, I would pray that every committee member, when you stand for these residents and when you speak, be sensitive, be understanding, because personally, businesses that are listening to this, it is time that transparency be key, because these issues have been going on far too long. And then if we schedule a meeting so the community can participate, but because of time restraints or our large director having to go home, then how do we ever get to the core? And with all due respect, Madam Chair, You eloquently said it. A lot of these issues happened before either of you committee members were here. But if you don't take time to allow transparency to surface and accountability, these matters will go on and on and on. And from a resident's perspective, how dare we challenge someone but not have the gumption to stand up and challenge someone? We'll be bold enough to say, I didn't call him back, because that's how we roll in Norwood. And that keeps the same status quo. Now, with all due respect, I came here with my time after a long day, but I want to see you all continue to do great work. But you have to be transparent and give residents an opportunity and business owners an opportunity not to be insulted, not to be offended. You don't defend someone who doesn't call you back. The proper response would be, that's not Norwood, and we don't want to represent ourselves like that. Not in all fairness, we want to make sure we don't rush to judgment. We've got to stop defending the wrong. Stop standing for what's wrong and call a wrong a wrong. How do you invite HCDC here and say we want to coach new businesses, and yet we don't even know if the ordinances that we're allowing these businesses to fall under are even following the right mandates? Where again, it's like an oxymoron. We're doing stuff that we might not even know if we should do it. And Mr. DeLuca made a valid point. There are businesses here, and we know this to be true. And we know that council members have even been given opportunities, but they hand select who they support, and they hand select what they support. And this is just an obvious example. So, with all due respect, if we're going to say it's open for the community, maybe we need more time, as been suggested a couple of years ago. But don't disrespect our business owners. And yet we defend people that are publicly say, I didn't call them back. How dare you continue that in Norwood? And that's why people looking out and looking in at us, they look at us and saying, hey, that's how Norwood rolls. We shouldn't do that, folks. If someone does something, listen, all of you in this room, if I do something wrong, you'll have your private, secret conversations and discuss it privately. Be bold enough to come out from behind whatever we're hiding behind, but it starts with respect. I was thoroughly insulted listening to this. With all due respect, sir.
At least 3 out of 4 you seem like you want to help. Somebody else seems to be attacking.
So, Mr. James, I want to say thank you for your comments. I hope that Mr. DeLuca did feel respected, and if he didn't, I would hope that he would make that known. I'm glad that you expressed how you feel. I too have had a work day, and I too remain a resident. And just because there are discussions that unfold in a public forum for the first time doesn't mean we're going to cover everything.
But it doesn't mean that we can't say, hey, we need to challenge that wrong that you presented.
And it doesn't mean it's going to get left undone, Mr. James.
I respect that.
It does mean that we've started a conversation, and I believe I did acknowledge that this committee heard Mr. DeLuca. Mr. James, none of us control other people. We just don't. And I think that
I guarantee you'll try to control me.
I think that what you've pointed out is very important, and my own reflection is that as these committee meetings continue to unfold, I'll be sure to make sure we allow more time for community voice. I'm glad you're here today. I'm glad everybody's here today, and I want to honor everyone's time by getting through the agenda. Thank you. I do want to move forward to Norwood Associations, neighborhood associations in Norwood. We've invited the Economic Development Action Group to provide an update on their work in the quality of life planning process. So is that the both of you or either of you here? Would you come on up to share an update on what is going on with the action group focused on economic development?
All right. Thank you for having us here tonight.
Thank you for being here. Could you just tell the public who you are?
Sure, I'm Lonnie Elfenbein. I am a co-chair of the Quality of Life Plan and helped organize the planning process.
I'm Dave Spattle, same.
And you're both Norwood residents, right?
Yes, we're
All
both
right.
Norwood residents. So, the Quality of Life Plan has been presented here. I'm assuming that you're aware of what's going on, why we're doing it, so I'm not going to bore you with the details. One of the topics that was a consistent theme through the process was doing business with Norwood, being friendly, which is kind of perfect timing to what Sonny had to say and what you just witnessed in front of you. In fact, there was a gentleman sitting back there who said he wants to do business, but the word on the street is that Norwood is notoriously tough to do business with. We want to help change that. We want to work with you guys, hopefully to have that work and have that happen, and really that's what our committee is trying to do. We want to encourage small business. We want to recognize what's going on here in Norwood, recognize the assets that we have in front of us, and be able to hopefully make Norwood a better place. Unfortunately, years and years, and it's awful to live in the past of what we've seen and what we've seen tonight have gone on, and I'm glad to see that a few of you are looking to hopefully change that. As far as what's going on now, you heard from HCDC earlier, there's some money being pumped into the community, and that's just one example of people wanting to give money to Norwood so we can better ourselves, whether it's through grants or other types of things. So we're not sure how we can spend that. Obviously, you saw some of that today. We're excited about exploring some other possibilities that come with grants.
Just as a point of clarity, the monies that HCDC received are to compensate them for the business services they described.
Correct. And also we're hoping that, we're still working through that. We're going to promote them a lot through this process, but they're just one example, I think, of other monies that are out there to be had. And Dave, can
As
speak
well
on
as
that.
data sharing for what we're doing. I mean, one of the important and most paramount things is that in moving forward with our process, we understand the business climate and other economic development principles operating in the city. So not only are we here to promote those groups that are looking to spend money here, but also to collect the types of data that help inform those processes moving forward. So at least partially for me, a lot of this is about fact finding. And so anybody that we can hook up with that provides that sort of data, that's important to our process as well.
We've got a lot of good businesses. We've got a lot of assets here. I mean, one of the things that came up, people love the Bluebird. It's been here forever. They serve, people say, the best biscuits and gravy in town. But then you hear stories such as people wanting to do business here, and we just want to hopefully, again, break down those barriers. So what are some of the things that we'd like to see going forward, or some of the things we're going to work on? Well, we have more long-term goals. We want to work with you guys to help make regulation and policy, make it more friendly to do business in Norwood. Make economic development a reality. There's been a lot of talk about the Montgomery Road corridor. Again, those are more long-term goals and asks. Short-term, something we had been working on for a while, and it was brought up, which might address some of the concerns that were brought up in this meeting, is having if you call it what you want, a doing business in Norwood job fair, not job fair, but a fair, where we can get the housing department, the building department, the legal department, city council as well, once a quarter, once a month, invite people who want to do business with Norwood to hopefully tear down some of those barriers that have been there in the past and make it more friendly for people to want to come do business here. Hopefully get rid of some of those myths or change some of that perception that's out there. We're very early in the process. We really only met once as a whole committee. We had the Quality of Life Plan, again, not boring with the details, had a visioning session, and then had one main meeting where we broke into subcommittees. And so this is the result of that first committee meeting. This process is going to be going on for, probably 4 or 5 more months, with a final report coming out January-ish, or end of the year-ish, but then having a more long-term plan that goes along with it. So, Dave, I've talked a lot. I'll let you go ahead.
I guess just to add to that, regarding the sort of open for business, let's call it an open house because that's the word that comes to mind for me. I can just provide a little bit of insight. When I worked in Northern Kentucky, we had a Duke Energy grant to do business retention and engagement, and we organized several people from both the county and the local governments to go out to businesses and visit with them. So we didn't have an open house. We actually brought the government to the business. And things like that were very successful. There were a lot of low-hanging fruit that we were able to sort of rip right off the tree and get done immediately. Things like there's a tree in our way, we can't get out of our driveway, or stuff like we don't know the process for signage changes, things like that. And it's nothing that has to be hard. It's just when the person is actually sitting in your office talking about your issues, it's much easier to start to address them.
Thank you for sharing those updates. It sounds like user-friendly processes, the Montgomery Road corridor, and some type of open house where the action group is focusing its attention?
Those are the initial. We're still very early on. I mean, as far as low-hanging fruit, what can we do now? That business fair, I think, is an easy goal to hit. The other things are going to be more long-term as we go through the process and hopefully build partnership with city.
Is there a chance for residents to still join in this action group? And what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, we meet every other week, so our next group meeting is next Wednesday at the high school. There's the Quality of Life Facebook group out there as well, and you can see as well a lot of the data that we've done through the Woven Oak website. If you're interested, just just join the Facebook group. We can get you information. I don't have the Woven Oak contact information. Leslie, you may have that if you.
Are you talking about the Woven Oak Facebook page? Or is there another group?
I think they have all the data from our original, from our data gathering. A lot of what we've done is available through their page, some of the visioning. And
is there a separate group for quality of life? Is that what you said?
There is now a group that was started, yes.
And that's for all the action groups?
Yeah, it's the process as a whole. We don't have a specific economic development group. So, there's inclusion, there's infrastructure, there's, about 8 different groups.
Right.
So even if economic development isn't something that you or a resident would be, not you personally, but that a resident might be interested in, there's plenty of opportunity to work with the Quality of Life group.
Any other questions from the committee? Mr. Thompson?
I just wanted to say that I would also pursue, in addition to the business fair, whatever, the thing that you did in Northern Kentucky where you take the city out to the businesses. I think that's a fantastic idea. I'd totally be up for it, and it's great it's a great way for us to connect out there and be proactive about connecting. It's interesting to me that I get several emails and stuff, but from people contacting me, but I'm still looking for ways to get out there and meet with people. So I would love to do that sort of thing with y'all if you have a chance.
You guys are all welcome to come to our meetings. I know James has been there, Leslie has been through the process to this point, but Eric and John, Eric, you were at the visioning session, if I remember correctly, but John, please come on by, see what we're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys being here too tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Any questions? Mr. James?
First of all, thank both of you, Lonnie and Dave, for coming. And I personally try to live by, if I make a mistake, I try to say, it's me, oh Lord, I'm standing in the need of prayer. And so I've had folks even come to my door, Mary for one, that have really been trying to engage me to get involved with the group. And I think tonight your articulation has, for me and those that think like me, gained a further step with that process. Would you all, I know you're still early, but a lot of the stuff that's being done is, like it was mentioned earlier, kind of done behind the scenes and then it's presented publicly, which I guess that's still somewhat fine. Would you all be open to, or maybe take this back, because I would like to see the committee look like real Norwood a little bit more. And I was at that meeting and it was a nice group of residents, but when I looked at the group, it didn't look like the Norwood that I know I talked to. And so then when we say a quality of life, and yet there's a segment not really represented, it really can't be a quality unless you're just looking at that demographic. Please look at that But would you be open to adding up all of the 8 topics, which I couldn't believe none of the residents thought of transparency? Because in order for us to transition from the history, and you made a comment tonight, it's about transitioning from the old Norwood to what many in Norwood want it to look like. But without transparency, and as you look at some of the corporate groups that have been successful, transparency is important for a community like ours because some of the issues that have plagued us aren't addressed. Yet people chuckle and they do this and they do that, and it's because they're not going to do anything but look at what is being presented. And that is called status quo. And people like me fight against status quo. And it won't end. So I would like to see a quality of life in Norwood include transparency. And I will go on the record because I don't know of too many other folks that are qualified because of the long history in our community to discuss transparency other than someone like myself. Instead of pushing things under the rug, not to be negative, that's the misunderstanding, but to be positive, to say, here's really what a whole lot of people think about us. And if we're going to move that to be like a Oakley or a Hyde Park or some of these other vibrant communities, Norwood has had a plague on us that those other communities haven't had. And if we don't address those people that come in and say, hey, I want to make it better, they're coming in because that part of the neighborhood never touched them. They never were a part of it, they didn't recognize it, or maybe it never hit their block. But the people that I talk with, and the people that think like me, definitely still have that myth that transparency is not a priority.
So,
Would you please consider bringing that up, and then Lonnie, you can call me personally, and I would be at that meeting.
So I just want to I think your core question is, what is the planning process doing to create transparency?
No, it's not one of their core agendas.
So
I
why
think
is
it's
transparency
transparency
not?
in the
Okay, can you
government.
address that?
Yeah. Well, there are a couple. Let me address the easy one first. We have been deliberate since day one to try to build a group that represents all demographic, aspects of Norwood. Color, race, economic, sexuality, whatever. We've done everything we can to embrace that. Now, getting people to show up is a different story. And so we are welcome to everybody. In fact, for this to work, we need the buy-in of the community. I worked very hard to get you involved. I really wanted you, and I still would like you to be involved because I think you represent, like you mentioned, there's a group of residents in Norwood who you need to represent, who need to have that voice in this project. So I encourage you, and anybody listening to this or watching on TV, come to a meeting. As far as the transparency of our group, sure, we meet behind closed doors to plan our meetings, but there's nothing you're seeing, and I know you're not accusing of that, that you're not seeing anything in front of the public and it's happened behind closed doors that you're not going to see in public. As far as transparency within Norwood, there was a common theme in the results, and it was, it came out a lot, us versus them, the old school, the old boys network, good old boys network. Government is something that kind of encompasses all of our communities. It really is something that we're working with. Infrastructure, it's to deal with government. Small business, we have to deal with government. Economic development, inclusion. Everything we do, government encompasses all that. So did we have a specific subcommittee for government? No, because we're all working towards that common goal. So yeah, come to a meeting. Get involved with one of these groups, whichever one you see fit, and we're going to do what we can to hold everybody accountable. And transparent. That's since day one. If you know me, if you've seen what I do out there, that's what I call for. Completely.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll actually agree with Lonnie that there was a ton of effort that's been ongoing to get people to come to the visioning session, and I know Hillary has been out there posting about this too, about trying to get people to come to the group. So I actually thought there was more probably outreach, Madam Chair, for this specific overall quality of life goal than I've seen for hardly anything else in Norwood since I've been here. So I wish that we could get more people involved. I mean, I hope Mr. James gets involved as well, and I find it very helpful. I've been at the infrastructure one, and that Hillary and is co-chairing, and it's been very helpful to hear some of the voices that have been there. So yeah, I encourage anybody to go to the quality of life things and get involved on whichever committee they want to get involved on.
Okay, thank you both for being here. I hope that as you continue to meet, I know you said you got a meeting coming up, that you'll keep coming back with updates. We hold space on our committee agenda to hear that, so that, like Mr. Thompson said, we can support and to the extent it's possible, collaborate on some of the ideas that are surfacing.
Next Wednesday at the high school cafeteria, is it 7 or 7:30? I think it's 7.
It's 7.
I think it's 7, yeah. So 7 o'clock, high school high school cafeteria next Wednesday. Come on down.
Yeah. And so the invitation for you to come back, I just want to explicitly say part of the reason is so that it can be captured in a public setting. So when people can't make it on a Wednesday, they can still be hearing updates, at least monthly, what's going on. So thanks for being here at this time.
Thanks.
Look forward to seeing you next month. So our next committee goal area has to do with community engagement in Norwood, and we're going to discuss murals with artworks. So I'd like to ask Colleen Houston. Colleen, nice to meet you. Hi, come on up. Tamara Harkavy, come on up. And I'm going to ask City Planner Greg Orris, come on up. And while you're coming on up, if you'll have a seat, by now you know that the air kicks up, so don't be shy about using your microphone. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect.
Thank you, Councilwoman Stevenson, for inviting us. I'm Colleen Houston. I'm the Chief Programming Officer at Artworks. And if you don't already know Tamara Harkavy, she's our founding director at Artworks and a Norwood resident. So when I told her I was coming tonight, she was happy to join. I'll also say that together we started the mural program in the city of Cincinnati, the Artworks mural program 11 years ago in partnership with the city of Cincinnati. And my father is also an artist and sign painter and muralist who lives here in Norwood. So if you're watching, hi Dad. But we have a long track record. Artworks is about 23 years old. We employ youth ages 14 to 21 to work in apprenticeship with professional artists. And all of the murals are painted by local youth. In fact, we've hired a lot of Norwood artists and youth to work on murals in Cincinnati. So we commend you for exploring a mural program here in Norwood and would be thrilled to work on a partnership with you. I think this came about maybe through your interest, or potentially, I know we were put together through LISC. LISC has been a supporter in the past of Artworks projects and primary focus locations around the city and region. So yeah, we're happy to talk to you more about our process. And I think one of the things you asked us to speak about is really the value, the community value of murals.
Yes, I do want you to, and I just want to interject for just one moment to make sure that the timeline of how we got to today is clear for people. So LISC was one of the funders for the quality of life planning process, and they provided some of the technical assistance to the action groups that are still meeting. LISC, knowing that one of the things came up was community engagement, community perception, economic development, recognize murals as designed through the Artworks program could help Norwood accomplish some of our goals. So the very thing that's been raised up here today, trying to engage in a new Norwood and have opportunities for residents to experience the quality of life they're voicing, is how I believe LISC made the connection to Norwood, and we learned, as you articulated, there is a deep Norwood connection, which is neat to know about. And so in preparation for our conversation, Greg Orris has drafted some things for our committee to consider as it relates to zoning, as it relates to requirements, as it relates to guidelines, because we've not yet addressed this in Norwood. And so our conversation, while I hope will be holistic, it might be a little twofold. I think in order for I think, and I'm looking to the rest of the committee to see what you think, I think it could benefit us to hear some of Greg's recommendations and how we got to consider these first, so we can understand a little bit of the context and the impact for our zoning and our city, and then hear more specifically about what is an Artworks project and what is the value of it in a community. How's that sound, committee?
Sounds great.
Okay, I just want to have some context for what we'll consider. Did you want to add something?
I maybe will address this as you work through, as you explain what your thinking is. This zoning amendment for murals is a big question I have, and I just got it, and I haven't had a chance to read through it. But it can be a very helpful tool, or it can be a hindrance.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious to see what this amendment means, and then what your process is to say yes or no or whatever.
So we were provided with this in preparation for this meeting, so we're reviewing it collectively for the first time.
Okay, so we're all seeing it for the first time.
And so, while we may have read it before today, we're discussing it for the first time today, and part of my hope in having this ready for today was to really get some real-time input. You've been doing this obviously longer than we have.
We're pretty good at it.
And
I would say
you
we're
do
pretty
have a
good
great
at it,
reputation. So while we are obviously accountable to the city of Norwood for what we would recommend that council consider, I wanted to make sure that we had some real input, since we don't have an internal expert on this impact. So I'm glad you raised that. As we do go through it, I do welcome your feedback. So Greg, could you walk us through some of this material, and then I would like to make sure we all get educated on what is an Artworks project and what could that mean?
Okay. A couple years back, we redid our sign code to eliminate anything referencing content. So a lot of our old provisions either had stipulations that commercial speech or religious speech, content-based sign regulation, which is obviously unconstitutional with the First Amendment. We specifically kept out the murals at that point, just because of the back and forth of the discussion then on allowing murals, not allowing murals, how big murals, what commercial speech and murals was also brought up. And really what I wanted to do is, with this, is draft language to get the discussion going on what we first define murals as. They pretty much have a very standard definition that you see in a lot of different zoning codes. What other zoning codes have done that have been legally either challenged or not challenged. That's what we're hopefully trying to avoid. You'll see a lot of legal challenges on murals. When you look it up, you can find cases all over the place related to that. And the other one that we found is that you really cannot differentiate between commercial and non-commercial speech. So I know we've had one even with the BZA that came up recently, or a good example that comes up with the paint bucket on the side of a building, and it's a paint store, and is that counted as a billboard? And what really, as I've researched it, it's dangerous, I think, to make that distinction. So you really don't want to say that that's commercial speech, that's a big billboard, so we shouldn't allow it. It has to be either based on aesthetics. That is actually governed under a lot of law cases, that city can base it on aesthetics and public safety or welfare, so a distraction. So really that's what these are in here, and this is a very preliminary draft with all of them. So what it is to tamp down fears that people get with murals. So I've had communities that love murals, and then have other individuals who are strongly against murals because they feel as though it opens up a Pandora's box. So that if you allow one mural, you then in essence have to allow all murals, and obviously art is subjective, and what some people may think is beautiful, others may not think is beautiful, so then you just get this tug of war, and so people just say, hey, don't allow any murals. And I think that's kind of where we are, or where we've been almost like a moratorium in a way on murals. So this is the first sort of opening up of that discussion so that we can take advantage of great opportunities when we're presented with them. but also so for the other people on the other side of the cone can feel that they have a layer of protection to either aesthetics or public welfare. And that's where these provisions come in there. So if you just go down the list, it sort of gives the purpose, like any zoning code language, definition on it.
So the definition, Greg, for a
Yes.
mural, for original art mural would be a hand-produced work of visual art which is tiled or painted by hand directly upon or affixed directly to an exterior wall of a building. And then there's some original art murals do not include. And so those exemptions, there's 3 of them, plus what I just read, that would be the whole definition.
That's the definition.
Okay.
Of a
So
mural.
nothing mechanical, nothing electrical, nothing that changes while it's affixed.
Correct.
Okay.
At least to review. And then it kind of goes on to allowed original art murals that meet the certain following criteria. No part of the mural shall exceed 30 feet in height, measured from grade. All murals be less than 200 square feet, containing less than 3% text. So that's kind of the way that you can sort of reduce the commercial aspect of it, is by the text size. Be located in an industrial commercial building. So we can designate what districts. That would be another way to decide what districts murals would be allowed in. So typically they're not allowed in residential districts that I've seen in cities, but allowed in commercial and industrial areas. And then apply to all murals containing non-commercial speech or commercial speech or a hybrid of both. So we have to be prepared that by allowing that, we could, things that could be construed as potentially billboards. But in some weird ways, I mean, you see on the old brick buildings, you'll see an old Coca-Cola sign or some old paint sign that was there, and so that kind of, and we save those in cities. So in some ways, those old advertisements that we see, I think, become part of the cultural fabric. So I just went to the sign museum over there in Spring Grove Avenue. It's neat to see them in a museum like that, and things that you would once considered ugly out on top of the gas station in a setting like that, they have a lot more beauty than you originally see. So, and then it just says prohibited murals. So it says on residential buildings with fewer than 5 dwelling units, on historic or conservation landmarks, murals on buildings that have been identified as contributing structures in historic districts, in a public right-of-way. And then it kind of goes on compensation. I won't read through that whole one. Just in compliance with the planning and zoning code. And then there also is a part that, I mean, this is where I don't know if you run into this, there's a part that certain communities do that you have a whole neighborhood involvement. So you send out notice before a mural can go up, and it shows what the mural is going to be, and you get community input back and forth, and then it goes in either in front of the planning commission or council. So you set up the framework of how these murals are approved. And that's kind of what the last part of that says. And then there's just general guidelines that I've seen from a couple communities that talk about how to guide that. And then there would be an application that you fill out that goes through a whole process as well.
Any questions so far? Mr. Bonsoff?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question on page 5 for, let's see here, maybe it's actually page 3. It's under site selection. It says, in order to ensure that public art is fairly and equitably distributed throughout the city, and that it is cited in such a way as to enhance and activate public spaces, and then it has like listings of sites where murals are to be displayed. So when you put fairly and equitably distributed, I guess I'm just trying to understand that. Are you saying that, like, are you assuming here that murals are going to be more publicly funded, or, because I mean, I'm thinking of a lot of these murals are going to be privately funded or funded through fundraising. So I guess I just want to see is it the responsibility of whoever approves it in this to make sure that those people put funds across the city? I guess I'm just trying to figure out, like, is it our...
I think it's more spatial is what it's referring to.
Okay, just in general, just a
Yes,
general
that
spatiality.
If you have
Okay.
a mural over here, make sure you don't a cluster of them, or it's just saying in here that you should try to have representative murals in different parts of the city.
Okay.
So-
More of a spatial aspect. And really, any of these, this is, like I said, open for debate. We can strike anything that seems arbitrary or over the top. If you're like, wait, why don't we want a cluster of murals? And then, I'm wide open on potential change on any of it, really.
Yeah, if I thought that, Norwood was at a point that we were going to be able to fund 3 or 4 of these, just from city funds and stuff like that, then, maybe that would be a somewhat more appropriate language. I mean, to me, it's like if there's an organization out there that wants to put up a mural, I wouldn't want to stand in the way of them because it's not fair that some other part of the city didn't get one. Does that make sense? So I don't want to limit organizations' ability to put murals up. But yeah, I hear you about the spatially, to make sure they're spatially distributed.
And it could be really, instead of that being so specific, other general characteristics that are encouraged, is another way. If we feel like any of the other provisions are helpful, it just sort of says experience high levels of pedestrian traffic, easily visible and accessible to the public, serve to anchor and activate its site, enhance the overall public environment and pedestrian streetscape experience, and help to create a place of congregation and activity, and establish landmarks and neighborhood gateways. So I think it's saying areas that you would want to encourage.
Gotcha.
Murals.
You have a follow-up?
Well, it's just about another topic, so. In here, so if you want to move to something else first.
I do want to go back to the process piece, and I'd love to get the artworks input on this. The final line of that talks about it's a process requirement only to do neighborhood engagements on the bottom of the second page. But that the suggested language here is that in no event will a mural permit be granted or denied based upon the content of the mural. Is the process step something that you already utilize to engage the community in developing, not so much developing the concept, but sharing the concept before it goes up?
I would say we do it both ways. And Colleen could probably speak to that.
Could you speak into your mic a little more? Thank you.
I thought I was.
The air kicks up.
The air goes on.
I think Colleen can speak to process a little bit, but we'll refer to it as community engagement, and the way you engage a community can be very different depending on where you're aiming to produce a piece of art and who you're aiming to work with and what your intended outcome is. So that process, would you say it varies depending on the constituency involved?
Yeah, when I think about how we work with the jurisdiction, the city of Cincinnati, I think that they have been very forward-looking in terms of building a mural program and building over time a lot of equity, putting murals in all of the neighborhoods in the city was an original goal, and so we were mentored by the city of Philadelphia, and they have a really amazing mural program with over 3,000 murals, and it's they're really one of the international leaders in terms of kind of arts tourism, and it's anyways, we studied with them. We built a proposal for the city of Cincinnati, and the city of Cincinnati were quite wonderful to artworks and continue to be. I mean, the city leadership, they've really helped to pave the way, and early on they supported a special ordinance to support more murals and to reduce, I think, some of the restrictions in permitting. Also, I think there was a mural code at the time that presented some restrictions. So, for example, that a mural could only be on one facade of a building. It couldn't wrap around, things like that. It couldn't be on the front facade of a building. But they, I think, have really believed and invested in the mural program, specifically because of the youth employment aspect, and that's something the city of Cincinnati supported since day one of Artworks. We do not submit any, I mean, I'd be happy to talk to you about what that looks like in detail, but we don't submit any content, any artwork to get any permission at all. There's trust that there will be community building, community partnerships, and that's what Tamara was speaking about. I mean, there's always sign off on what the art is by the property owner and by residents and essentially community, whoever the community partner entity is, and that's a group. But there's a lot of trust that the work is going to be high quality. It's going to, I think the only exception for that is when we're working on city-owned property or historic property in a historic district, and then there's a special presentation made that shows the design, and then there has to be a vote for special permission. So one example is we painted a mural on the exterior of the convention center in downtown Cincinnati, and that's a city-owned property, and there was no precedent of paint on that property, and so there was a special presentation where the art was shared, and it was voted to be approved. So if that helps.
That more than answers my question.
Okay.
I was just more curious, like, did you actually have a community engagement component as a part of your process? And I hear you talking about it and how that leads to the final result.
Yeah, it's just not related to a mural permit, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes. Because you're saying in the city of Cincinnati, there is an ordinance that permits a whole program.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I mean, it's very permissive, isn't it? Is it a sign-off from the building department, or pretty much? Or
So we go through an environmental review process on each property. So we do submit the address, and we show the location of where the mural will be. And so there's an evaluation of like the existing masonry, if there's a precedent for paint, or a recommendation if it goes for historic review. But that's essentially it. And then we get permission. We have partnered with other jurisdictions as well. So we just this summer completed a mural partnership with the Village of Silverton. We worked in Springfield Township. In fact, Tamara and I just went and we worked with Waco, Texas to launch a mural program. So we have a lot of experience working with other communities. The Village of Silverton was really also forward thinking, so they put a whole public art plan together. It was a 9-month process, and they involved community leadership in that process. They did opportunity mapping. They determined how they would fund their public art. So they had a lot of input in, what walls would be great for murals, or what green spaces would be great for sculpture or other art enhancements. Really seeing, and this kind of speaks to the value. I think this is a great example because it's a nearby community that has believed and invested in art and what that can do for the community in terms of enhancing quality of life for residents, attracting business. So they have actually created a 1% for Art program with any new developments. That and they have a city entity that helps with maintenance of art, and that's the same entity that's managing parks. So I think that just locally, they're a really excellent example to look to. And we painted a mural with them. And I also wanted to share, this is a great resource for funding, but Hamilton County, I wanted to make sure I wrote it down correctly, Community Development Block Grants through HUD. Actually, they were able to apply for funding specifically for the mural. And so, that's just a great resource if you wanted to fund an individual project and support local youth employment and, for Norwood residents or a more diverse group. That's really what supported that project, as well as the project in Springfield Township. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's super helpful. Any questions at this point from the committee?
Yeah.
Mr. Monsell?
Thank you, Madam President. Madam Chair. So how does the city of Cincinnati actually fund those? Like, how do the murals get funded in the city of Cincinnati? So is it through artworks donations? Is it mainly through city funding?
Because we're a nonprofit 501 organization, we have a variety of tools that we use to fund our program. Our annual budget's about $2.5 million, maybe sometimes a little higher, a little lower. The city contributes about $120,000 to $150,000 a year from community development block grants in a program called Youth to Work. And that helps support our ability to hire and train and engage kids in our program. And then the other dollars are dollars that are raised through partnerships. We did talk to an entity here in Norwood a while ago, and it's Miller, and they wanted a mural, and they have a beautiful wall for that. And our program costs money because of the employment of artists and the employment of kids, and I think the price tag kind of blew them away. But thank you. The tools that we use, grant writing, fundraisers, adopt and apprentice dollars, county, city funding, LISC funding, are pretty common tools that many cities use for these kinds of efforts. And because we're a nonprofit, we have some ability to leverage dollars and create partnerships to get this kind of work done.
I want to follow up on that. So, with the idea of a project coming to Norwood, would you be able to put together a scope of work that private investors could adopt?
We could put together a budget.
Okay.
I think it's a really interesting opportunity as I look at what the work that you've done, and like to carve out a place to try it, and with some really good why do we want to do this, and sort of future thinking and the engagement of the community in a place that makes a lot of sense would be something I think that would be incredibly exciting. I know I would love it as a Norwood resident. You have some murals in this part of the world. I don't know if it's actually in Norwood, but the scooter shop, that's that's actually one of my favorite buildings that's painted in the city. Simple and elegant and wonderful. But I think there's a whole lot of ways to tackle this, and I think when your experience with LISC and the county was pretty gorgeous. It made it very simple for a trial run for the city of Silverton and Springfield Township.
Do you
have another question?
Just in that, so I guess just to understand more, so I guess Silverton for their mural, can you describe what that partnership looked like? So there was a funding, component from the city of Silverton, or the village of Silverton then?
Yeah, so I guess I was expressing that they were able to leverage Hamilton County block grant dollars. So they, I think my understanding is we're able to fully support that initial mural with that, but they also have started a fund for public art, and so this 1% for art fund, and so they felt confident committing to the mural as really the first installation activation of their public art plan, because they had dollars that they could count on. I believe they were successful in getting that county funding to support that project, and it could have gone to other capital projects too, but they supported the mural. So
great, thank you.
Yeah.
So I have a couple more questions, but
in the city of Hamilton's, I guess another example, we worked with them on their first mural, but then they built their own mural program. So Tamara is also, she loves to teach, and that's what we did in Waco. We really went and did a training, and now we're not working with them on their murals remotely. We taught them everything they needed to know. And so I think that's really true in Hamilton. And then they've launched and sustained a mural program, which is really extraordinary.
That's exciting to hear. I think part of my hope in having the conversation about the amendment piece, as well as learning about the process, was really to better understand what is your process and what would we need to have in place. Right now, it's nothing. And so I'm wondering if you can maybe step back and just talk through what would it look like, not so much the money piece, but logistically, how does a process flow? And what's kind of a timeline when you do a project with a city?
Yeah, so I think a desire, a willingness, to probably not make it too restrictive, and we could, talk more about this, give specific feedback if you're open to that, since you're in a draft phase. But yeah, I mean, if the city of Norwood was the partner, it would probably start with identifying a potential site. We would evaluate the site and ensure there's permission from the property, if there's necessary permission from an adjacent property, so that you can erect the scaffolding. And we would start with that site evaluation to build a budget and talk about engagement goals. So, Tamara was talking about your why, but if, there's different ways to paint a mural. Not every mural has to employ youth, but that's the magic of a partnership with Artworks. So we would, that if that was a goal that Norwood had, that would be, it's a great way to invest directly in your community, your residents. So, that's part of defining a budget and a scope of engagement. Typically, we start planning projects at least a year out. We're trying to plan projects closer to 2 years out at this point, just to have more runway and planning time and development time. Yeah, I mean, typically if we have a budget, we'd work on the funding plan and make sure we have the ability to move forward with further engagement. But I hope I'm not skipping things, but then, we start talking about ideation. If there's a committee of stakeholders that are involved and there's clear decision makers, that's super helpful, including the property owner. But if there's other residents, or in this case, if it were this council or a representative of this council, that certainly, it's helpful that we have a consistent group that we're working with. And that's everything from maybe identifying a theme to reviewing artist portfolios, selecting an artist, ultimately selecting the final design. What's really wonderful with our program is that youth apprentices help make a presentation, so they're building their professional skills. So, I mean, I'm sure that would be really great if there was a committee of this committee and the youth apprentices were making a professional presentation of the final artwork. So they're involved in that process. The wall prep can take anywhere from, 2-3 weeks, but it's just advanced scheduling, making sure the space is accessible, and then erecting scaffolding, cleaning the wall, priming the wall, and sometimes there's more masonry repair needed on walls. But the actual mural painting, it can take as long as 2 months, and then there's and so we like to paint as many murals as possible in the summer, since we are committed to employing youth, but we also do murals in spring and fall as after-school projects. When the scaffolding comes down, we throw a big party. So we came from a mural dedication tonight. That's really fun. That's a wonderful way for the community to celebrate the accomplishment. And we've seen tremendous enhancements to physical space as a result of, I think, how communities are engaged and feel motivated by that accomplishment. So we've seen murals become illuminated, like additional fundraising, like we're going to light this mural, we're going to beautify, we're going to landscape, we're going to paint this nearby building, because, it's really just, there can just be this incredible ripple effect. Some of our most successful murals actually have paved the way for new development. So, really, they've helped attract breweries and new business, and it's just incredible to see what that initial investment in art can do in terms of, as you were talking about, attracting people to gather and the vibrancy of a city. So, and please jump in and typically at least a year just for planning and ideation and community engagement. Community engagement is really before, during, and after the mural. So.
Thank you. Sure. That's very helpful to begin to visualize what this could mean. I liked hearing you express how the intent is to use the summer to engage the youth. I know we've got a lot of youth opportunities here, and having more is always a good thing. So thank you for walking through that. I think I'm understanding that the opportunity to work with Artworks is definitely beginning with having a willingness and then working a development plan. to make sure financially it's feasible. And from there, creating buy-in to where it is, what it looks like, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
And I've lived in this neighborhood for 25 years. As a resident, I would be more than happy to spend some time reviewing this or helping you plan and identify a location. And I think it's that development piece, that funding piece is the nut that we all struggle with. It's hard to raise money, but it's a great story to tell, and I think it can do a whole lot for the community if it's done right.
I agree with you. I worked in Avondale when you all did that mural, and I saw it going up, and I walked over and I said, Cedric, somebody just put graffiti on my garden shed over at Gabriel's place. Can you come paint it? And he kindly said no, but if you wait, I'll bring a summer camp. And he did. He brought the Kennedy Heights Summer Art Camp, and it was a beautiful partnership. We got to talk to them about growing food and sustainability, and the kids put up a beautiful bit of work.
Leslie just hit Colleen's sweet spot when you started talking about Gabriel's place and the farm.
Yeah, we can definitely talk more about that. I share that because I have some personal relationships with nonprofits because of my experience working in nonprofit, and so I know I would very much welcome your feedback, whether that's directly with Greg, who can share updates on the revisions with the committee, you contacting the committee members, myself directly. I think there are organizations here that would be willing to partner and think about ways to bring something like this to Norwood. I know that the action groups will continue to meet, and art was an area of interest. We do have another community member here who I know is very interested in this topic, so I'd like to invite any comments you have.
Well, I want to say that the Silverton mural is my favorite so far. It's no secret I'm a fan of the graphic treatment, and I like the Fiona mural also. I like the fact that there were different submissions, and then that was a different, seemed like a new process and that one followed through. So one of my questions is, I know that working with the youth is a hallmark, but I'm wondering if that is a must-have in Norwood, given that there might be a sticking point financially. We have so many artists here, adult artists, professional working artists. Is there some way we could take that money and put it into our living arts engine here? If we can tailor the process to meet Norwood's unique criteria. My other comment is just that we have so many professional artists here. Obviously, I would like to see as professional a product as possible, and one that's looking forward in terms of Norwood's identity in 10 or 20 years. A mural that really makes a leap forward.
I mean, Norwood can structure.
Can I just paraphrase the
program
question
any
real
way
quick?
they want.
So the question was, could we tailor the process to include adults in the work of the mural creation? And then is there a way to engage artists in Norwood in the creation of the concept? Is there a way to engage artists here to create a professional product?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. So, I mean, with the partnership with Artworks, and we always engage professional artists to help lead the design, and we do reach out to multiple artists, and as you mentioned, sometimes do an open call, so it's just really, but I mean, that could be tailored to Norwood residents, like artists who live in Norwood, if that's desired. I mean, it again, it's really up to you, like what is valued and meaningful. Not every mural has to be painted with youth. That is a hallmark of Artworks mural program. It does make it more costly. It's just a wonderful way to invest in a local program that it helps connect more deeply, I think, to the community and to the future generation. Helps them be more connected to where they live. So, but I actually know, and there's probably lots of Norwood artists that have great ideas for murals or have looked at walls for a long time and said a mural would be great there. Taylor's like, I know lots of walls. But there's a great artist who lives here who had a really specific idea, and it would only be in Norwood because this is where she lives and she talks to her neighbors, and she wanted to paint a mural that was around oral history and kind of telling these stories about her neighbors. But you know, her style's super contemporary. So I mean, that's the kind. It would be really amazing to hear what are Norwood artists' ideas for their own community. But she would probably want help to paint it. Not every artist needs help, but usually an extra hand or two are helpful.
So I'm looking to the committee members. Any other questions or comments about either the proposed zoning amendment, the guidelines, the process that Artworks uses? Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is exciting. I'm really curious to know where Norwood's going to go with this. This is pretty exciting. It seems like a lot of fun. I'm curious to know on the prohibited murals. It says residential buildings with fewer than 5 dwelling units. Is that something that you came up with, Mr. Orr? Is that something?
Yeah, a provision that
just
I've seen.
The size of the building, or?
Yeah, what I did was try to take a spectrum of different codes that I saw and provisions that looked like they made sense for Norwood on them, because one of the main reasons is that these have been tested in the court of law. So I think that's one of the big, I always am hesitant to just make up any type of zoning language. You don't want to be the first case subject in a lawsuit. So I think that was just for scale wise.
Okay.
But like I said, what I'll do is I'll send the Word document, and if you just put on track changes, and that way we have a copy of what you recommend we remove from it, and then we'll send it to the other side of the coin, folks, and they'll say what they want to add to it, and I think that's where the debate can be had to figure out what makes sense.
Perfect. Thank you. That's all I have. Thanks.
No.
Okay, Mr. Ronsall.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I definitely want to make sure that we get input from Artworks on this, and to make sure that, and it sounds like that's going to happen. I really am very curious once you read through this to see your comments. I'll also be curious to hear what the city administration has to say, and I think we should really make sure that we keep them engaged in this process, as much as possible, since they basically control the planning commission. Yes, since they basically control the planning commission, who is going to be the ones that has to approve any text changes to the zoning code. So yeah, definitely both those, and I am really excited about this as well. I personally want to say that I think the mural program in Cincinnati has been fantastic. Like, my wife and I have multiple times just gone down to over the Rhine or downtown. We have the list where the murals are, or we just walk around and just discover them, and it's just a fantastic experience. And if we all have a personal favorite, my personal favorite is the one that kind of has the Roman columns. I don't even know which building it's on. It's on Central Parkway, but
the Cincinnatus mural.
The Cincinnati, yes, yeah. I think it's fantastic. But there's so many. The one at Kroger that has the produce falling out. Just so many fantastic things, and I think there's so many ways that you can structure these murals to really, I guess, appreciate the history of Norwood, and then also talk about, as Ms. Bull said, what the future is looking like. And I'm excited for what could be. So, just anything that you all have feedback for us on as we do this, I just very much welcome it, and just want to emphasize that. And yeah, I'm just excited for the direction. I appreciate you bringing this up today as a topic.
Did you have anything, Mr. Thompson?
Sure. 200 square feet is too small. That's just 20 by 10 feet on the side of a building is no problem.
Yeah.
I figured that would come out in the revisions anyway, but I'm all for having murals in Norwood. I'm a creative professional, and I think it's great. I think it could be a great way to tell the story of our city and to look to the future of our city. I'm all for having more artistic opportunities in our city. I love that like Dana said, we have tons of artists in our city, but I love the idea of getting youth involved. I think that's a great thing that you bring to your program, and would be an incredible thing to do here. And I'm just excited to see this to actually come to fruition and allow us to be able to do some of these things, because Norwood deserves it. It's a great looking town, and it could use some great looking art. So thank you.
Good quick question while I have you here, and I think that's what we're looking. Have you ever had the situation, I think we're all thinking of the perfect murals and the murals we all love. Have you ever had a situation where an artist proposed something or a building owner proposed something in a city and it was denied, or it was unsightly? Or all murals, like, I don't think all murals we hope are inherently beautiful.
Pretty good
But
question.
I think that's what we're trying to fix and make sure that we do this in a way that's legal, that gives the city flexibility enough to say, based on aesthetics, which I believe is something that you can review on, that you're denying, a committee is denying it, and we're not then getting sued afterwards. Because
Are
it's
you an
free
attorney in real life?
art.
Are you an attorney?
No. I'm the planner, like, doing the zoning code. That's what gets,
Yeah,
I don't
you're a
want to
planner.
have our attorney have to fight any language that I propose. I guess that's the gist of it.
We've put some restrictions for it, certainly, in what artists can design around. So there can be no logos. That they shouldn't be misconstrued as signage. Like, they're supposed to be art. And then we also have a few restrictions around, nothing religious or
Inflammatory.
overly, provocative. Recognizing we do have public funds, and as a nonprofit, we have a reputation to protect. So we want to be good stewards of our funds, and we're working with communities. So we put forth a creative brief, typically, that an artist would respond to, and then we reach out for multiple artist submissions. So there's always choice.
Yeah.
There's multiple choices on what the design is. There's not ever just one design that you have to refuse. That you're looking at what's the best design for this site, taking all of the community input into consideration.
I meant, it's more that if another organization besides artworks, so you can say no religious or no logos, technically the city cannot, that's content, screaming content on there, which is not allowed. It's a free speech. So it's if someone else besides, so Artworks does a lot of great ones, and then other people come in and say, oh, I want to do a mural.
We're not the only game in town anymore either, so I understand
so that's,
that.
right. Or a random individual should be able to then apply to be able to put up a random mural that's not necessarily part of an organization.
Sure, you're talking about an independent.
An independent
artist
once you allow
approaching the
one
city about a mural.
theoretically, you have a system set in place that anyone should be able to come and do an application to a mural that they feel is beautiful.
I hear what you're
their
saying,
eyes.
and I think where we're at, and I'm trying to make it clear up front, we've got a couple of things we're thinking about. One is, what is it that we as a committee would want to report out to council to consider in terms of language regarding zoning? The second is, how could we as council begin to think about what would the city need to be willing and ready to do in terms of partnering to support a mural project? And I think during the discussion, the thought was maybe we pilot something to really better understand what would it take of our city. I think the phrase that's been used a lot, forward thinking. With all the discussions here tonight, I think there's a wealth of impetus to pull from in thinking about what could a visual display of forward thinking look like for us. And so I want to ask that, Mr. Orrs, when you do share the electronic file, and Artworks does provide feedback, that you would send a revision of that to this committee first and allow this committee to report out to council what we think would be appropriate then to put before as a draft to the administration. That way we have one streamlined conversation, and then and it may be that we need to discuss the draft before we report it out. But I'd like for us to keep the discussion here for now. That way we can have a little more time to make sure we're understanding the feedback that comes in.
Yep. That sounds good. What I imagine it would be having both copies. Here's kind of the original, or here's their strikeout language, and have discussion, and then try to send it to potentially the other side. Listen around to see people who may have issue with murals and get their opinion somewhat to find some.
I hear what you're
ground.
saying. I think we probably have a lot of good guidance that'll come from 20 years of experience, but I think also maybe looking at the city of Cincinnati, how they've established an ordinance authorizing a program could be helpful as well. Any other questions or comments on this topic? Oh, Dave.
I'm Dave Battle. I work for the county in community development. We absolutely have fun with two murals, and the process is not arduous by any means.
Thank you for your money.
Yeah,
thanks. That made it possible, and yes, thank you.
And I believe, just to clarify on that, the separate fund, from our perspective, that funded the last mural in Springfield Township, I believe was the Community Economic Development Assistance Program. And that's a separate application from your regular 3-year application cycle. So we do that every year, and that's something that Norwood can apply for directly for funds for a mural, and that's how.
Could you say the name of it again?
Joy called.
Community Economic Development Assistance Program.
So Hamilton County also has available the Community Economic Assistance Program.
CDAC for short.
Oh, Community Economic Development Assistance Program, which is a potential resource that the city of Norwood could apply to fund a project like a mural. And that's an annual funding opportunity.
Yep, applications closed 2 days ago for the current round.
Okay, applications closed 2 days ago for the current round.
We have a pre-application process before that, so what we do is we stagger it so that first we qualify projects to make sure they're eligible before somebody has to go through the process of submitting a full application, and then we have a full application that goes out. And so projects that are deemed eligible, they then have the opportunity to fully explain why they're the most competitive project around that project.
Thank you. That's something that can look into as well. Any other final thoughts on this topic?
This is a great opportunity. There's so many nuances to doing a project like this. And I, again, through Joy and the county and that phone call, it was so great to be able to employ, I think, at least 24 more youth this summer on projects that have an impact a little further out than the city of Cincinnati. And I mean, most people don't know Norwood isn't in the city of Cincinnati, so I think it's a kind of a really perfect jump for opportunities to enhance this city.
Thank you very much.
I have more. I want to talk to you. But the other thing you should know is that Silverton came to us 3 years ago and wanted us to do a project, and we just got it done this year. So it's in some cases, persistence is going to pay off eventually.
Thank you for that caution. That's helpful for us to know we might get the foundation laid and someone else will see the fruit of it. Thanks again for your time. I appreciate you coming,
Thank you for
especially after
inviting
your
us.
other
Thank you.
event this evening.
Thanks for your work too, Brian.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so much fun to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We did enjoy it. That's what she was talking about. She really liked it.
So we have just a couple more topics that are updates mostly, and just one thing to consider. So our second topic under, oh, thank you. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were coming.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Great job.
We can say site specific. You don't really leave it more general. Yes, right. Okay, I'll send it out.
So also with community engagement, updates on administrative requests. And so we had heard a while ago on some development projects, and I just wanted to share out some updates. One of our goals is to try and stay abreast of what is happening with development projects and really create, word of the day seems to be transparency. So with regard to the Perry and Derrick, we heard an update a while ago, so I'm going to read this. So there was a property maintenance violation orders and building orders that have been written The owners have been cited. Currently, there is a pause for the police to serve the citation. It appears that, not appears, the building department shared that those were written and given back in March. And so I'm not sure what that normal timeline is, but that is where that property lies. With regard to U.S. Playing Card, the building is being marketed by the current owner, but there are no current development plans that have been shared with the city. The skating rink we heard about, it doesn't seem to have been any progress in terms of there's still a federal court situation going on with regard to the insurance claim from the flooding a couple of years ago. The Quality Hotel, a couple meetings ago, I think we were being told that there were soil tests being done. I don't think there were no results from that ever given back to the city regarding the Quality Inn. However, I guess going back to June, the property went back to the lender, and so there is no activity right now. Additionally, with that same Quality Inn location, the building department has not received any plans or timetables has not received any, no updates, no activity. The last site, sorry, I was getting my notes crossed here. So the former X-Rail was purchased by the Joseph Auto Group, and it's planned to be redeveloped into a new car dealership. At this time, though, there's no plans that have been shared with the city or a timetable for developing that. So those are some of the major projects that at one point we'd received an update on and we're trying to just stay abreast of. If there are other locations or sites that we want to take a deeper look at, you can just share with me, and when I send in for updates, I'll be sure to add those. Any questions or comments about that? Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you so much, Madam Chair. So I just want to emphasize to the residents at home kind of watching that Quality Inn, that the fact that the lender has taken it back is huge progress for kind of the next step forward for where that's going. Basically, the people that had bought that building, they paid too much for it, and they then had to deal with just damage that happened because they didn't keep the heat on, and just many other things that they were not anticipating. And so in order for them to do anything with it, they would have had to sell it at a high enough cost to pay off their mortgage. And so it sounds like they weren't able to do that, which means that the property, like I said, the lender has the property again. It's not a bank, it looks like a private equity firm. But hopefully now, and I plan on reaching out to them, but hopefully now there's can be progress where the lender can sell that building, at a loss for sure. There's no way they're, getting 2.6 or whatever however much last transfer was. I actually can't see it on here, but they're not going to get as much money as they were probably owed, as probably was paid for originally. So anyways, it's great news. I appreciate you sharing that update about the transfer. I did want to provide one quick update on the site next to Cornerstone, so across from Smith Road, from Cornerstone. It's basically Williams Avenue all the way up to the CarX, but not including the CarX. And so there was some clearing work that's done there, and there's two houses there that the owner wants to demolish. I did get a chance to talk to the owner. The owner, I think, still wants to put a hotel there, but the logistics and the cost of it are like really in contrast, and they're working on trying to figure out what they do with that property. But there has been some clearing away. They hired a demolition company that really is, I'm talking to the building department, which has been very helpful in this process for this. They said that the person that actually, did the demolition, they're just not somebody that really is a super reputable company compared to other companies that are, they're very familiar with the process. This company likes to do things and apologize later. I won't mention the company's name, but finally, though, there was some clearing that happened where there was just a bunch of brush that was sitting there that was finally taken care of, and I know the building department's trying to be on top of that, and hopefully we'll have an update for that site here at some point.
This is that property on the corner of Smith and Edwards, right?
Smith and Williams. So this
Smith
one,
and Williams,
yeah, across from Shell and then across from Cornerstone.
Right.
Yep. So that's it would be super exciting if they can have, put a hotel there. That just shows the value of Norwood and just our location. But you know, the logistics aren't worked out on that, especially with the parking and the way the site's kind of laid out. So they're working on that. But yeah, thank you for all of these other updates. That's been fantastic, and I know that citizens will appreciate that.
Any other thoughts on, is that a question?
I'm curious to know, you said on one of your updates about flooding, since the flooding, that was like, can you elaborate on that?
So the Fun Factory skating rink was flooded in 2016.
Okay.
And my understanding is that the owner of the property has filed a claim against the insurance company, so that the property is in federal court regarding insurance damage for flooding. And the law department is aware of the federal court situation, was the exact update that I was sent from the building department.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
You're welcome. So it's been a while.
Sure.
Anything else on the updates? So the last piece here under community engagement is really this overview of opportunity zones. I shared at a last regular meeting. The south part of Ward 1, Hopkins Avenue going south, Montgomery Road, that whole area of our city has been designated as an opportunity zone. Believe that members of the committee were provided with the legislation as well as an overview of what opportunity zones are. Essentially, there's an opportunity for investors to take advantage of a federal program to develop capital gains, to bring some equity to that part of our city. And I suggested then it may be worthwhile for this committee to meet with the finance committee to think about, is there an opportunity to actually attract an investor during the time frame of this federal opportunity? These are not, this is not incentivized with local funds, but it is in fact an area of our city where an investor could come and receive potential positive return on their investment. So if you haven't had a chance to review it, we can table it for now. Projects are, in theory, able to be developed between this year and next year, and then would have a 10-year investment time frame. There are some conditions that are needing to be met in terms of the investment has to be in a business that's primarily located here. It has to spur economic development and job creation, and the funding for the business opportunity has to go through an opportunity fund, which has to be designated in terms of an IRS process. It's self-report though. So any thoughts at the moment, or do we need to come back to this at another time?
Quick
Mr.
question.
Braden?
Sorry, Mr. Bonzel.
No, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You mentioned Hopkins going south from Montgomery. Are there areas that are vacant that need developed right there? There's something that's not coming to my mind. I'm not thinking of someplace, or?
I have not done an exhaustive audit.
Okay.
I think that's something that we could discuss further, or we could
Okay.
discuss in a joint meeting. I
Sure.
think that there's definitely reason to think on this. It's a good opportunity, I think, to get ahead of, we'll just take what arrives and maybe think about putting in place some of what we desire.
Okay.
And be able to be ready to articulate to a developer, whether it's in this funding opportunity or in the future, what do we want? I'm not sure that stretch of Montgomery, what vacancies would be there,
Okay.
if it would be an investment that would actually meet the threshold that's a part of this. But my hunch was, when I heard of this, it was something that if an agreement is made, we'd like to know, because we're interested in knowing what development happens in our city.
Sure.
And the more we can think about it comprehensively, the better.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Bonsoff?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess my question too, so let's say we identify these properties and they're in the opportunity zone. Are you wanting what's the goal then from the city? Should the city be like, do you imagine the city kind of promoting the sites? Do you imagine us, maybe doing some kind of a rough draw, like sketch that, to Mr. Oroz's abilities at least, to, kind of show what it could be? The site I'm kind of thinking of basically is the car wash site right next to, I guess, diagonal from University Station. Maybe there's something there that could be a better use of that site than, or there could be other sites too, the old car lot, if that's in the census tract. But I just want to just confirm to make sure what you think the city's output is going to be kind of in this process.
I think it goes back to what we've been saying as a theme here today. If we are wanting to attract businesses, I think it would be good if we could define what kind of businesses we want to attract. I also think it would be beneficial for us to think about how to advocate for the type of process we want businesses to experience. Thus far, I'm not aware that the city has a plan at all. And I think because there is an opportunity that doesn't cost the city anything, it would be worth our time to really hone in on what do we want to attract. I know that part of the work happening with HCDC could in fact position a startup to be in a vacancy on Montgomery Road. I don't know though. And so there is an unknown. This isn't a process where I'm encouraging us to say we only want these types of businesses, but rather think about if businesses are coming here, what's the value add that we're looking for? And so it's kind of I would say the policy side, at least in my mind's eye, it's more how do we on the policy side of economic development begin to outline what we find beneficial to the city. The same way the action groups are coming up with ideas that they hope to implement that might foster a higher quality of life, I think we could potentially use some time to develop goals and criteria, almost mirroring what some municipalities used as a community benefit agreement to begin to spell out what do we want here.
Excellent. That's good.
To add, Madam Chair, I actually have for that site there something, a rough like 3D concept or something of what could potentially go there and what properties would need to be assembled for that to go across from Xavier. So I can send that to you, at least as a starting point of what we had there. It was like a street-facing commercial building with some apartment-style look mixed into there. And that's the property, the car wash property. I mean, that would be assuming assembly by a separate developer of the site. I think that's what one of the things we're missing for requests for proposals or qualifications is we just don't have assembled sort of parcels. That's what, a lot of developers are looking for, that city to already have some 6 acres or some minimum style acres is what we heard, 3 to 6, 3 of the minimum, 6 would be opportune that we literally own and you just about pretty much hand over that as a cost of them coming in and bringing tax dollars. But it's a little off subject from what you're saying there.
I think I missed the first part of what you said. Are you saying that lot on the corner is city owned?
No, I'm just saying we had a design, as when James was talking about a design concept that we could potentially show to developers of the potential for the site. I have something just started, at least, to get the ball rolling on that I can send out.
So I think having an idea of what our open parcels are is great. I know that some of the work CBI is doing to support the planning process is to look at vacancies and even structures. I think one of the things that's important to me is that as we begin to vocalize and create plans that attract new business, that we're very mindful not to displace, and that we can, as needed, maybe not in the current opportunity that's focused on startups, but connect businesses to resources to bring them along with the forward vision that we're creating. So I think that would be helpful, Mr. Orrs, for what you're saying.
Yep.
Do we think that we want to discuss this more? Do we think it's worth a joint conversation?
I mean, me personally, I'm not sure what I'm not sure what the finance committee is going to add here. I mean, I'm fine with having a joint conversation for sure, and we can schedule the meeting. It's no big deal at all. I feel like the Economic Development Committee is probably the bigger player here. I guess if you're, with a $20 million, municipal budget, every little bit does help, but I don't know if it'll be, it's not going to be, I don't think it'll be a huge factor like the financial plan for any one specific property to be developed. I mean, it'll definitely be influenced, but I don't know if it'll influence enough to need to meet to try to plan out the future cash there. But any additional dollars that comes in, very much welcome and helpful, not for sure. So it's your choice. I'd still keep me updated, and we can get that scheduled if you think there could still be value there.
Any other thoughts? Nope. Okay. Well, we won't pursue that at this time then. I'm glad with that. We can keep discussion here.
Okay.
All right. And I think that takes us to our last area. We always hold time for an update on the planning process for the quality of life in Norwood. We did have members of the steering committee here earlier. Is there a specific update overall that you have to offer us? And if so, would you come up?
Yeah. Actually, I had a comment about opportunities.
Oh, okay. Well, come on up and you can share that too. And thank you for staying.
I like this stuff.
It is your work. That's
nice. So thank you for the recognition there. My concern with opportunity zones is the way it was written and as was passed by the Congress. It's pretty ripe for abuse. And so I think it's great that you all are looking at ways to implement this in a way that you have some protection up front. My concern is that based on my reading of the legislation, there is no way to control a group from coming in, like an REIT, and basically lapping up a bunch of land that's ripe for development, holding it for 10 years, and then capitalizing on these slow gains of the community improving generally. And so what that means to me is you need to be looking at ways to force people to develop vacant property if they acquire it and intend to hold it for 10 years. I don't know what that solution looks like. I've seen the city of Cincinnati doing some things around that, like vacancy licenses. But I think it's really great that you all are considering that, because that is a definite concern for me as somebody that works in this area. So that was my comment.
That's great.
Thank you for that comment. I heard this presentation from the National List team, and I heard those very concerns that it could not go well for communities. And so I'm not an expert at all. This is your day job, not mine. But I appreciate your comments. When I heard that, it sounded like, yeah, we really should educate ourselves on this. And I'm glad for you sharing that. Are you available as a resource? If we decide to hold more conversation, could we invite you back to talk with us about?
Yes.
Thank you. I think we'll appreciate that. Okay, so for the quality of life role that you also have, you're on the steering committee. Are there any general updates? We heard from a specific action group before, but are there any general updates that you can make us aware of?
No, I think that what you observed with us is kind of what's happening generally with all of the groups. So that's sort of the situation across the board.
So the next meeting is this Wednesday?
Correct.
This coming Wednesday. Today is Thursday. So this coming Wednesday, 7 to 9 p.m. at the high school.
Correct.
Residents can still come, join any of the action groups, and help create plans.
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much for being here. Members of the committee, we've had a very robust agenda. Lots to consider. I think it all bobs and weaves between not only what we consider with development, but how we engage the community. I said in one of my responses earlier, I believe to Mr. James, that I want to restructure how we meet so that as we go through these topics, there's a time to hear from the public on each of them. And I think I'm going to challenge us to think about ways we might maybe even restructure, not just having comment time, but how we're holding the conversations. Because I do want to be responsive. I think at least some of you are aware, I was very intentional about calling this the Community Engagement Committee as well as Economic Development, because I do want any resident to feel like they can come and ask us what's going on. And I think with that, my hope was we could also help residents understand our role. Something that I think may not be clear, but I just want to speak to it in light of some of the comments that were made today. We do have a building department and we do have a building commissioner, but the building commissioner does not report to us. We have at times had committee of the whole meetings, at least one, where the mayor attended and made it clear that council is welcome to interact with the administration and seek out information. Mr. Bonsall did share he had a conversation with Mr. Stoker, who is our building commissioner. And in my experience and other experiences that were shared here today, sometimes the responses are different. Different being sometimes there's easier access than other times. And so I want to be clear in making sure we know if there are questions we have of the administration, we can be asking those. In my experience, the building department works best to respond via email anyway. If you run it through the mayor's office, it might feel like an extra step, but I think that's what generates action and can continue to create accountability since we do not contract with that administrator. The other thing I want to say is, as a resident, I did not interact with city council before choosing to be a candidate for a city council. There was no intentional engagement. And I think part of it was my own apathy at the time. I think part of it was it's a big juggling act. And that's not to be dismissive of anyone's effort or the ease at which it may seem some of us serve as counselors. And so I just want to welcome any ideas we might generate for how we help the public understand our role and even how we make ourselves available to the public as well. I don't want people to feel like they're being slighted. However, as policymakers, I realize we don't legislate how people feel. And so would really look for you to add more feedback to how we approach our meetings as you have ideas. But then really want to just keep encouraging us to think about how do we engage the public. Bringing the action groups here has definitely been one way to hear from residents who maybe don't typically engage. The whole quality of life planning process was another intentional step. And so as it relates particularly to our goal around welcoming people to our city, whether that's as a business or as an individual private resident, I do want us to stay vigilant, to think about how do we, who represent residents, who are residents, really keep fostering opportunities to build trust. I don't assume just because we sit here, people trust us. I also don't assume that because we sit here, people get to know who we are and understand our role either. So I just want to share that out because I heard a lot of passionate appeals for transparency, for engagement, and for just creating more space to be heard. And I want us to think about how we can respond to that collectively too. If there aren't any other thoughts, Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, just thank you, Madam Chair. So I did just want to make a recommendation that potentially, meeting more than once a month, and maybe splitting out. So maybe the first meeting of the month we'll talk about the first 3 items, the last meeting, whatever. I personally think it might be more engaging for people that want to come and visit, that they can choose kind of which topic, or even guests that we have. We have a guest on the last item. They're waiting here 2 hours here at this point. Not every meeting is going to be as action-packed as this one was, but I also wanted just to kind of clarify when we talk about the building department and talk about just kind of working with the city in general. I am under no illusion that this city is perfect. I'm under no illusion that the building department is perfect, and I know that there's a lot of improvements that can be made at the building department and at the city. Even just things that I've heard about that happen at the city of Cincinnati, or even in building departments in other counties that potentially we could do to really streamline and improve things. So I just want to clarify and emphasize that because it is, as much as the one topic that came up here, I might not have specifically agreed with, all of the actions that person took or didn't take, to go along with it. I'd also, want to clarify that, if somebody calls our building department, they should be called back. I mean, that's a very standard, if you call any department, you should be called back. It's a very standard thing, even if it's the secretary calling back to communicate some information and not the building commissioner, not the mayor, not the safety service director, not the auditor. Somebody from that office should be calling the resident back. So just want to kind of clarify that, and hopefully when we talk about the quality of life plan, they talk about, there's a community image one, or
Community perception.
Community perception. I think that wherever that falls into, but I look forward to hearing back from the community about that and ensuring that we can kind of work on that to try to recommend to various departments about a communication plan about how quickly you should be responding to emails, to phone calls, and what have you. So yeah, lots of improvements that we can make, and just want to acknowledge that that's out there.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall.
Yep.
Any other thoughts? Feedback? My heartfelt appreciation to each of you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for staying.
Thank you.
And thank you for sticking with all this work. We are adjourned.